Once Claire sees her room set up, she can't say no, my mom said, her voice clear through the audio feed on my laptop. I froze, staring at the screen. I was sitting in a hotel room in Portland, Oregon, 1,500 miles away from my condo in Kansas City, Missouri. The business trip had taken me out of town for a week, and I had only 2 days left before heading home. But right now, watching my parents move through my living room like they owned the place, I felt my blood turn cold. My name is Emma, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a corporate accountant for Quenro Data, a mid-sized firm specializing in analytics and cloud storage solutions. I've worked hard to build my career, save money, and buy my own place. My condo is modest but mine. Every piece of furniture, every dish in the cabinet, every decision about the space was something I earned. But my parents never saw it that way. To them, what was mine was theirs. And what was theirs was also theirs. I watched my dad appear on the screen, carrying a box labeled Claire's stuff. He set it down in the spare bedroom, the one I used as a home office. My mom followed, holding a lamp with a floral shade that I recognized from my sister's old apartment. "She'll understand once she sees how much effort we put into this," my dad said, glancing around the room. "Claire needs this fresh start." My mom nodded, hands on her hips. "Exactly. Emma has always been the responsible one. She'll do what's right for family." I clenched my fists. They weren't asking me. They weren't even telling me. They were just doing it, assuming I'd roll over and accept it like I always had. Claire was my younger sister by 4 years. She was 28 and had spent most of her adult life bouncing between jobs, relationships, and apartments. Every time something went wrong, my parents swooped in to fix it, and every time they fixed it, they expected me to help carry the load. Growing up, I was the one who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and didn't ask for much. Claire was the one who needed attention, needed support, needed everything handed to her. My parents praised me for being independent, but what they really meant was that I was easy to ignore. When I graduated college and started working, they asked me to help with Claire's student loans. When Claire lost her job, they asked me to cover her rent for a few months. When she broke up with her boyfriend and needed a place to stay, they asked me to let her crash on my couch. I said yes every time. I told myself it was what family did. I told myself it wouldn't last forever. But it did last. It kept lasting. And now, watching my parents move her things into my home without even asking, I realized they never planned to stop. My mom turned toward the camera, and for a moment, I thought she saw me watching, but she was only adjusting the angle of a picture frame on the desk. She smiled, satisfied with her work. "This room is perfect for her," she said. "I'm glad we thought of this." My dad nodded. "Emma's always been understanding. She won't make a fuss." I wanted to scream. I wanted to call them right then and tell them to get out. But I didn't. Because I knew if I confronted them now, they'd find a way to twist it. They'd say I was overreacting. They'd say Claire was family, and family helps each other. They'd make me feel guilty for even questioning it. So instead, I took a breath and kept watching. I needed to know exactly what they were planning before I made my move. I clicked through the other camera feeds. The one in the hallway showed more boxes stacked near the door. The one in the kitchen showed my mom unpacking dishes and placing them in my cabinets. They were setting up like Claire was going to live there permanently. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "Hi, sweetie. Hope your trip is going well. Can't wait to see you when you get back. Love you." I stared at the message, my jaw tight. She was acting like nothing was happening, like she wasn't literally moving my sister into my home behind my back. I thought about all the times I had swallowed my frustration, all the times I had let them overstep because it was easier than fighting, all the times I told myself it didn't matter because I loved them and they loved me. But love wasn't supposed to feel like this. Love wasn't supposed to feel like being used. I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair. I thought about my childhood. about how my parents had always treated my space as communal. My bedroom was where Claire stayed when she had nightmares. My toys were the ones she borrowed and never returned. My savings were the emergency fund for the whole family. I thought about the time I saved up for months to buy a bike, only to have my parents give it to Claire because she wanted one too. I thought about the time I got a scholarship to a summer program, and they asked me to turn it down so I could babysit Claire while they went on vacation. I thought about every single time I put myself second because they asked me to. And now, they were doing it again. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. This time, I was going to stand up for myself. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security camera app again. I watched my parents move through my condo, their faces relaxed and confident. They truly believed I would just accept this. They truly believed I was too soft, too accommodating, too far away to stop them. They had no idea what was coming. I thought about all the years they treated my space, my money, and my life as community property, while bending over backward to accommodate my sister's every whim. When I was 14, my parents sat me down and told me they were proud of how mature I was. They said I was responsible and dependable, and they knew I'd always do the right thing. At the time, I felt special. I felt like I was finally being seen. But looking back, I realized what they were really saying was that I was easy. I was the child they didn't have to worry about. I was the one who wouldn't complain. Claire was different. Claire needed things. She needed help with her homework, help with her friends, help with everything. And because she needed help, she got attention. My parents bent over backward to make sure she was okay, to make sure she was happy. And I got used to being the backup plan. When I was 16, I got my first job at a grocery store. I worked evenings and weekends, and I saved almost every paycheck. I wanted to buy a car so I wouldn't have to rely on my parents for rides. I wanted independence. But when Claire turned 16 2 years later, my parents asked me to lend her money for a car. They said she needed it more because she had a job farther from home. They said I could wait a little longer. I handed over the money, and Claire got her car, and I kept taking the bus. When I was 21 and finishing college, I applied for a paid internship that would have looked great on my resume. I was one of the final candidates, but the week of the interview, Claire had a crisis. She'd broken up with her boyfriend and was threatening to drop out of school. My parents begged me to come home and talk to her, to help her through it. I missed the interview. Someone else got the internship. And Claire stayed in school for another semester before dropping out anyway. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I'd have other opportunities. But the pattern never stopped. Every time I had something good, something that was mine, my parents found a way to redirect it toward Claire. And every time, I let them. When I bought my condo 3 years ago, it felt like the first thing that was truly mine. My parents had helped Claire with rent, with deposits, with furniture. But I did it all on my own. I saved, I budgeted, I worked overtime. And when I finally got the keys, I felt like I had won something. My parents were proud, of course. They said I was setting a great example for Claire. They said I was proving what hard work could do. But they also started asking if Claire could stay with me sometimes. Just for a weekend here and there. Just until she got back on her feet. I said yes the first time, and the second time, and the third time. And now, watching them move her in permanently, I realized they had never stopped seeing my space as theirs. They had never stopped seeing my life as something they could rearrange to fit their needs. I closed my eyes and thought about the spare bedroom. I had set it up as a home office because I worked from home 2 days a week. I had a desk, a filing cabinet, a whiteboard for planning projects. It was organized and functional, and it was mine. But my parents didn't care. They saw an empty room and decided it was wasted space. They saw an opportunity to solve Claire's problems, and they took it. I opened my eyes and looked at the screen again. My mom was hanging curtains now, the kind with tiny flowers that Claire loved. My dad was assembling a bed frame, humming to himself like this was just another weekend project. They looked so comfortable, so sure of themselves. I wondered if they had even considered asking me, or if they just assumed I'd say yes, or if they knew I'd say no and decided to do it anyway. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mom. "By the way, we're planning a little surprise for when you get home. Something to brighten your day." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. A surprise. That's what they were calling this. I thought about responding. I thought about saying something vague and polite, something that would buy me time. But I didn't. I just set my phone down and kept watching. I thought about Claire and how she'd become so dependent on our parents. She never learned to stand on her own because she never had to. Every time she stumbled, they caught her. Every time she needed something, they provided it. And when they couldn't provide it themselves, they came to me. I thought about the last time Claire had stayed with me, about 6 months ago. She'd promised it would only be for a week. It turned into 3 weeks. She ate my food, used my streaming accounts, borrowed my clothes without asking. When she finally left, she took one of my favorite sweaters and never returned it. When I mentioned it to my mom, she said I was being petty. She said family shares, and I should be grateful I had a sister who wanted to spend time with me. I wasn't grateful. I was exhausted. And now they were doing it again. They were assuming I'd just accept it. They were counting on my guilt, on my sense of obligation, on my unwillingness to make waves. But I was done making myself small to accommodate them. I was done sacrificing my own happiness to keep the peace. I picked up my phone and opened my email. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. When they started discussing how to move her in before I got home, I realized they truly believed I was too soft or too far away to stop them. The next morning, I woke up early and checked the security feed again. My parents were back, this time with Claire in tow. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was carrying a suitcase, and my mom was pointing toward the spare bedroom with an excited smile. "This is going to be so good for you," my mom said, guiding Claire inside. "You'll have your own space, and Emma will love having you here." Claire hesitated. "Are you sure she's okay with this?" My dad waved a hand dismissively. "Of course she is. We wouldn't do this if we thought she'd mind." Claire bit her lip but didn't argue. She never argued with them. None of us did. I watched as they unpacked more boxes, as they hung Claire's clothes in the closet, as they set up her toiletries in the bathroom. They were moving fast, like they wanted to get it all done before I came home. And then I heard my mom say something that made my stomach turn. "We need to finish this before Emma gets back," she said, glancing at my dad. "Once everything's set up, she won't have a choice. She'll see how much work we put into it, and she'll feel bad if she says no." My dad nodded. "Exactly. She's too nice to kick Claire out once she's already here." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. They knew I'd be upset. They knew I wouldn't want this. And they were doing it anyway because they thought I was too soft to fight back. They thought I'd just accept it. They thought I'd swallow my anger and make the best of it like I always did. But they were wrong. I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. I scrolled until I found the number for Gregory, my lawyer. He'd helped me with the purchase of my condo, and he'd told me to call if I ever needed anything. I needed something now. I hit dial and waited. It rang twice before he picked up. "Emma," he said, his voice warm. "What can I do for you?" "I need help," I said, my voice steady. "My parents are moving my sister into my condo without my permission, and I need to make sure they can't stay." There was a pause. Then Gregory said, "Tell me everything." I explained the situation in detail. I told him about the security cameras, about the conversations I'd overheard, about the boxes and furniture they'd already moved in. I told him about the years of overstepping, about the pattern of putting Claire first, about how they'd ignored my boundaries over and over again. Gregory listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "This is trespassing," he said finally. "They're occupying your property without your consent. We can absolutely handle this, but I need to know how far you're willing to go." "As far as it takes," I said. "I'm done letting them walk all over me." "Good," he said. "Here's what we're going to do." He outlined a plan. First, he'd draft a formal notice of trespass, stating that my parents and Claire were on my property without permission. Then, he'd prepare a lease violation agreement with financial penalties if they refused to leave. Finally, he'd contact the building manager to ensure enforcement. "The key," he said, "is documentation. You have the security footage, which is perfect. That proves they entered without permission and that you asked them to stop." "What if they argue that I gave them a key?" I asked. "Did you give them permission to use it for this purpose?" he asked. "No," I said. "I gave them a key for emergencies, not to move someone in." "Then we're good," he said. "Emergency access doesn't grant them the right to occupy the property or allow someone else to move in." "How long will this take?" I asked. "I can have the documents ready by this afternoon," he said. "When are you back in town?" "Tomorrow," I said. "I land at noon." "Perfect," he said. "I'll coordinate with your building manager. When you arrive, we'll serve them the documents and give them a deadline to leave." "What if they refuse?" I asked. "Then we escalate," he said. "But I don't think it'll come to that. Once they see you're serious, they'll back down." I wasn't so sure, but I appreciated his confidence. After the call, I sat in my hotel room and stared out the window. Portland was beautiful, with its trees and bridges and the gray sky that seemed to stretch on forever. But I barely noticed. My mind was back in Kansas City, back in my condo, back in the life I'd built for myself. I thought about the moment I signed the papers for the condo. I thought about the pride I felt, the sense of accomplishment. I thought about how hard I'd worked to get there, and I thought about how in just a few days, my parents had turned it into a battleground. I checked the security feed one more time. Claire was unpacking clothes now, hanging them carefully in the closet. My mom was making the bed, fluffing pillows and smoothing the comforter. My dad was installing a small bookshelf on the wall. They looked so content, so pleased with themselves. I thought about calling them, about trying one more time to reason with them, but I knew it wouldn't work. They'd dismiss me, tell me I was overreacting, promise to talk about it when I got home. And by the time I got home, it would be too late to change anything. No, I wasn't going to give them that chance. I was going to let them finish their little project. I was going to let them set up the entire room, let them feel accomplished and proud. And then I was going to pull the rug out from under them. I opened my laptop and started drafting an email to my supervisor, requesting an extra day off. I wanted to be rested and clear-headed when I got home. I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. Because this wasn't just about the condo anymore. This was about drawing a line. This was about showing them that I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. This was about taking back my life. I tried calling to confront them gently, but they ignored my questions, insisted I must have misunderstood, and kept pushing forward with their plan. After I finished speaking with Gregory, I felt a strange calm settle over me. He'd listened carefully, asked pointed questions about the security footage, and assured me we had options. He said he'd draft some documents and send them over by the end of the day. But first, he suggested I try reaching out to my parents directly. Sometimes people back down when they realize they've been caught, he said. Give them a chance to do the right thing. I wasn't optimistic, but I agreed. I ended the call and stared at my phone for a long moment before dialing my mom's number. She picked up on the third ring. "Hi, honey," How's Portland? It's fine, I said, keeping my voice light. Hey, I wanted to ask you something. Have you been by my place recently? There was a pause. Then she laughed, but it sounded forced. Why do you ask? I got a notification from my security system, I said. It looked like someone was inside. Another pause. Oh, that. Yes, your dad and I stopped by to water your plants. I didn't have any plants. Right, I said slowly. And while you were there, did you happen to bring anything in? Like boxes or furniture? Boxes? She sounded confused, but I could hear the edge in her voice. No, sweetie. Why would we do that? Mom, I can see the footage. I know you've been setting up the spare bedroom. Silence. Then she sighed, and her tone shifted. Emma, listen, I didn't want to tell you like this, but Claire's been going through a really hard time. She lost her apartment, and she has nowhere else to go. We thought it would be easier if we just got her settled before you came home. That way you wouldn't have to worry about it. Easier for who? I asked, my voice sharp. For everyone, she said. You have the space, and Claire needs help. I know you'd want to do this for her. You didn't ask me. Because I knew you'd say yes, she said, and there was a hint of frustration in her voice now. You always do. You're family, Emma. This is what family does. I closed my eyes and took a breath. Mom, I need you to stop what you're doing and leave. I'll talk to Claire when I get home, but you can't just move her in without asking. Emma, you're overreacting, she said. We're almost done. Just let us finish, and you'll see it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, I said, my voice rising. It's my home, and I get to decide who lives there. Claire is your sister, my mom snapped. Are you really going to turn your back on her when she needs you most? I'm not turning my back on anyone, I said. But I'm also not going to let you bulldoze over my life. Bulldoze? Emma, we're trying to help you. You work so much, you're barely home. Having Claire there will be good for both of you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I worked hard because I wanted a life of my own. Because I wanted to be independent. Because I didn't want to spend my entire existence cleaning up after Claire. But instead, I said, Mom, I need you to leave. Now. We'll talk about this when you get home, she said, her voice tight. I'm sure you'll feel differently once you see the room. And then she hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. She hadn't listened. She hadn't even tried. She dismissed everything I said and decided to keep going. I called my dad next. He picked up on the first ring. Emma, your mom told me you called, he said. Listen, I know this is a lot, but, Dad, I need you to stop, I interrupted. I don't want Claire living with me. I didn't agree to this. I understand, he said, his tone calm. But think about it from Claire's perspective. She's struggling, and we're just trying to give her a soft place to land. Then let her land at your house, I said. We don't have the space, he said. You know that. You have a 3-bedroom house. And we're using the spare rooms for storage and your mom's craft projects, he said. It's not practical. But it's practical to move her into my home without asking. Emma, you're being difficult, he said, and I could hear the frustration creeping into his voice. We're not asking you to do anything unreasonable. Claire will help with chores. She'll pay rent if she can, and she won't be a burden. That's not the point, I said. Then what is the point? He asked. The point is that you didn't ask me, I shouted. You just decided, and you assumed I'd go along with it. He sighed. Emma, we're trying to do what's best for the family. I thought you'd understand that. I do understand, I said, my voice shaking. I understand that you see me as someone who will always say yes, someone who will always put Claire first, someone who doesn't matter as much." "That's not true," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "It is true," I said, "and I'm done with it." There was a long silence. Then he said, "We'll talk about this when you get home." And he hung up. I sat there, staring at the wall, my chest tight with anger and frustration. They weren't listening. They didn't care. They were going to do what they wanted, and they expected me to fall in line. But I wasn't going to. I opened my laptop and checked the security feed again. My parents were still there, still unpacking, still setting up. Claire was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking uncertain, but not protesting. I took a screenshot of the feed and sent it to Gregory with a message. "They're not stopping. What do we do next?" His response came a few minutes later. "Perfect. Let them finish. The more they invest in this, the harder the fall will be. I'll have everything ready for when you get back." I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. This was really happening. I was really going through with it, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. Then my mom told my dad not to worry because Emma always gives in, and that sentence alone pushed me from frustrated to absolutely done. The next day, I checked the security feed obsessively. I watched as my parents brought in more of Claire's things. A bookshelf, a television, even a small couch for the corner of the room. They were transforming my home office into a fully furnished bedroom, and they were doing it with a confidence that made my blood boil. At one point, I heard my dad say, "Do you think she'll really be that upset?" My mom laughed. "Emma, no. She'll huff and puff for a day or two, but she'll get over it. She always does." "Are you sure?" my dad asked. She sounded pretty mad on the phone. "She'll be fine," my mom said, waving a hand dismissively. "Emma always gives in. She just needs time to cool off." That sentence hit me like a punch to the gut. Emma always gives in. It wasn't just an observation. It was an expectation. It was a strategy. They were counting on me to roll over, to accept this, to make their lives easier at the expense of my own. And the worst part was, they were right. I had always given in. Every time they asked for something, every time they pushed a little further, I said yes. I told myself it was because I loved them, because I wanted to help, because I was being a good daughter and a good sister. But really, I was just being a doormat. I thought about all the times I'd put Claire first, the time I missed my college graduation party because she needed a ride to the airport, the time I canceled a vacation because she was going through a breakup and needed someone to talk to, the time I lent her money that she never paid back because my parents said it wasn't worth the fight. I thought about all the times I'd told myself it didn't matter, that it was just one more thing, that I could handle it. But it did matter. It mattered every single time. I thought about my friend Bethany, who I'd met at work a few years ago. She'd grown up with a similar family dynamic, always expected to sacrifice for her siblings, always expected to be the responsible one. She'd finally drawn a line when her brother tried to move in with her without asking. "It was the hardest thing I ever did," she'd told me over lunch one day. "My family didn't speak to me for months, but I had to do it. I had to show them that my life wasn't theirs to control." At the time, I'd sympathized, but secretly thought she'd been too harsh. I'd thought family was supposed to help each other no matter what. But now, I understood. Now, I was living it. I grabbed my phone and pulled up Gregory's number again. He answered on the first ring. "Emma," he said, "I was just about to call you. I've finished the documents." "Good," I said, my voice hard, "because I'm not giving in this time." "I didn't think you would," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Here's what we're going to do." He explained the plan in detail. He'd drafted a formal notice of trespass, stating that my parents and Claire were occupying my property without permission. If they didn't leave immediately upon my return, they would be subject to legal action. He'd also drafted a lease violation notice for Claire, stating that any attempt to establish residency would result in financial penalties. The key, he said, is that you gave them verbal notice to leave, and they ignored it. That strengthens your case significantly. What if they refuse to leave? I asked. Then we escalate, he said. We can file for a restraining order, pursue damages for trespass, and if necessary, involve law enforcement. But I don't think it'll come to that. Once they realize you're serious, they'll back down. I hope you're right, I said. I am, he said. But Emma, you need to be prepared for backlash. Your parents aren't going to take this well. I know, I said. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep letting them walk all over me. Good, he said, because you deserve better. After the call, I sat in my hotel room and thought about what came next. I thought about the moment I'd walk into my condo and confront them. I thought about their faces when they realized I wasn't backing down. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me wanted to call them back and tell them it was okay, that Claire could stay. But I pushed that feeling down, because that's what they were counting on. They were counting on my guilt, on my inability to stand up for myself, on my fear of making waves, and I was done being predictable. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I packed my suitcase, checked out of the hotel, and booked an earlier flight home. I wanted to arrive before they expected me. I wanted the element of surprise. That evening, I checked the security feed one last time before bed. The room was completely set up now. It looked lived in, like Claire had been there for weeks. My parents were standing in the doorway, admiring their work. She's going to love this, my mom said. I just know it. My dad nodded. It's the right thing to do. Emma will see that. I closed my laptop and lay back on the bed. They were so sure of themselves, so confident that I'd just accept it. But they had no idea what was coming. I thought about my grandmother, who had passed away a few years ago. She'd been a strong woman, fiercely independent, and unwilling to let anyone push her around. When I was younger, she'd told me something that I'd never forgotten. Emma, she'd said, being kind doesn't mean being weak, and helping people doesn't mean letting them take advantage of you. You have to know when to draw the line. At the time, I hadn't fully understood what she meant. But now I did. This was my line. This was where I stopped giving in. I set my alarm for early the next morning. My flight was at 6 a.m., and I'd be back in Kansas City by 10 a.m. I wanted to be home before noon, before they had a chance to finish whatever final touches they were planning. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I wasn't wondering if I was being too harsh or too selfish. I was just being clear, and that felt right. So I called my lawyer and set up a perfect legal trap, ensuring any unauthorized entry or occupancy would come with financial consequences they couldn't ignore. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I did was check my email. Gregory had sent over the documents as promised, along with detailed instructions for how to proceed. The first document was a formal notice of trespass. It stated clearly that my parents and Claire were on my property without permission, and that they had been given verbal notice to leave. It included timestamps from our phone conversations and references to the security footage as evidence. The second document was more aggressive. It was a notice of financial liability, outlining the costs associated with their unauthorized occupation of my property. It included a daily occupancy fee of $200 per day, calculated from the first day they began moving Claire's belongings in. It also included potential damages for use of utilities, wear and tear on the property, and legal fees. By my calculation, they were already on the hook for over $2,000, and every day they stayed, the total would increase. The third document was the most clever. It was a backdated lease agreement with deliberately unfavorable terms. The rent was set at $3,000 per month, with a clause stating that any violation of the lease, including failure to obtain written permission before moving in, would result in immediate eviction and financial penalties. The beauty of this, Gregory had written in his email, is that it creates a legal trap. If they argue they didn't agree to a lease, they're admitting to trespassing. If they argue they did agree, they're bound by the terms. Either way, you have leverage. I read through the documents carefully, my heart pounding. This was real. This was happening. I replied to Gregory's email. "This is perfect. What's the next step?" His response came a few minutes later. "I've contacted Patricia, your building manager. She's agreed to be present when you arrive home and to serve the documents if necessary. She's also prepared to call law enforcement if they refuse to leave." I felt a rush of relief. Patricia was in her 50s, no nonsense and professional. I'd always liked her. She ran the building with efficiency and didn't tolerate any violations of the rules. I sent Gregory one more message. "Thank you for everything. I'll let you know how it goes." His response was simple. "You've got this." I finished packing and checked out of the hotel. The drive to the airport was quiet, and I spent most of it rehearsing what I would say. I wanted to be calm and firm, not emotional or defensive. The flight was uneventful, but I couldn't stop checking my phone. I kept pulling up the security feed, watching as my parents moved around my condo. At one point, I saw my mom arranging fresh flowers on the kitchen table. At another, I saw my dad carrying in groceries. They were settling in like they belonged there, like it was already decided. When I landed in Kansas City, I texted Patricia. "I'm back. Are you available to meet at my place at noon?" Her response came immediately. "I'll be there. See you soon." I picked up my rental car and drove toward my building, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I felt nervous, but also strangely calm. I'd spent so many years avoiding conflict, avoiding confrontation, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up for myself. But I was about to remember. I arrived at my building at 11:30 a.m. and parked in the garage. I didn't go up to my condo right away. Instead, I sat in the car and pulled up the security feed one more time. My parents were in the kitchen now, unpacking groceries. Claire was in her new room, hanging pictures on the wall. They looked comfortable, content. I took a screenshot and sent it to Gregory with a message. "They're still here, moving forward as planned." His response was immediate. "Good luck. Call me if you need anything." At 11:55 a.m., I saw Patricia enter the building through the lobby camera. She was carrying a leather folder, her expression serious. I got out of the car and met her in the lobby. She nodded when she saw me. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," I said. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor in silence. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. When we reached my door, I paused and listened. I could hear my mom's voice inside, humming to herself. I could hear the faint sound of the television in Claire's room. I slipped my key into the lock and opened the door. The moment I stepped inside, everything seemed to freeze. My mom was standing at the stove stirring something in a pot. My dad was setting the table. Claire was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. They all looked up at the same time, their expressions shifting from surprise to confusion. "Emma," my mom said, her voice too bright. "You're home early. We were just—" "I know what you were doing," I said, stepping inside. Patricia followed behind me, and my parents' smiles faltered. "Who's this?" my dad asked, his tone wary. "This is Patricia, the building manager," I said, "and she's here to deliver some documents." Patricia stepped forward and handed my dad the leather folder. "You're currently occupying this property without the owner's permission," she said, her voice firm. "These documents outline your legal obligations and the consequences of remaining here." My dad opened the folder, his face going pale. My mom moved to his side, reading over his shoulder. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock to anger. "What is this?" my mom demanded, looking at me. "Emma, this is ridiculous." "It's not ridiculous," I said. "It's the law. You're trespassing, and I'm giving you formal notice to leave." "Trespassing?" my dad said, his voice rising. "We're your parents. We were helping you." "You weren't helping me," I said. "You were helping yourselves. And I told you to stop, but you didn't listen." Claire stood up from the couch, her face pale. "Emma, I didn't know—" "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "You knew I didn't agree to this. You knew my parents were doing this behind my back, and you went along with it anyway." "I didn't have anywhere else to go," she said, her voice trembling. "That's not my problem," I said, and the words felt like breaking glass. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Claire. I really am. But that doesn't give you the right to take over my home." My mom's face twisted with anger. "How can you be so selfish? She's your sister." "And this is my home," I said. "You don't get to decide how I use it." "We put so much work into this," my mom said, gesturing toward the spare bedroom. "We spent days setting up that room for her, and you're just going to throw it all away?" "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. "You did it because you thought I'd give in. You did it because you thought I was too soft to fight back." "We did it because we love you," my dad said, his voice softer now. "We thought you'd want to help." "Then you should have asked," I said. "But you didn't. You just assumed." Patricia cleared her throat. "According to the documents, you have until 6 p.m. today to remove all belongings and vacate the premises. Failure to comply will result in legal action and financial penalties totaling over $2,000, with an additional $200 per day for each day you remain." The room went silent. My parents stared at Patricia, then at me, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. "You can't be serious," my mom said, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm completely serious," I said. "You had every chance to stop this. I called you. I told you to leave. And you ignored me." My dad looked down at the documents again, his hands shaking. "These fees, Emma, this is thousands of dollars." "I know," I said. "And if you don't leave by 6 p.m., it'll be even more." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, please, don't do this." But I held firm, because this wasn't just about the condo anymore. This was about respect. This was about boundaries. This was about showing them that I mattered. While they proudly walked into my condo with boxes, I watched the security feed as they triggered every clause of the agreement I'd prepared. After Patricia left, the silence in my condo was deafening. My parents stood frozen, the documents clutched in my dad's hands. Claire sat back down on the couch, her face buried in her hands. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, trying to steady my nerves. My hands were shaking slightly, but I felt a strange sense of calm. I'd done it. I'd stood up to them. My mom was the first to speak. "Emma, this is insane. You can't just kick us out like this. We're your family." "You keep saying that," I said. "But family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me." "We've always supported you," my dad said, his voice rising. "We helped you through college. We were there when you bought this place." "You helped Claire through college," I corrected. "You paid for her tuition, her apartment, her car. I paid for all of that myself with loans and scholarships. And when I bought this place, you were there, but only because you thought it would eventually be useful for Claire." "That's not true," my mom said, but her voice wavered. "It is true," I said. "And you know it. You've always put her first. And I've always been okay with it because I thought that's what family did. But this is different. This is my home. and you don't get to take it from me." Claire finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I didn't want any of this." "Then why didn't you stop it?" I asked, my voice softer now but still firm. "Why didn't you call me and ask? Why didn't you tell them this wasn't okay?" "Because I didn't know where else to go," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I lost my apartment, I lost my job, and I had nowhere to turn. Mom and Dad said you'd be okay with it, and I believed them." "You should have asked me yourself," I said. "You should have given me the choice." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I felt my resolve waver. She looked so broken, so lost. But I couldn't let that change my mind, because this wasn't just about her. This was about years of being taken for granted, years of being expected to sacrifice my own needs for everyone else's. My dad set the documents down on the table, his jaw tight. "These fees are ridiculous. You can't possibly expect us to pay this much." "I don't expect you to pay anything," I said. "I expect you to leave." "And what about Claire?" my mom asked, her voice sharp. "Where is she supposed to go?" "That's not my responsibility," I said. "She's a grown woman. She needs to figure it out on her own." "She's your sister," my mom shouted. "And I'm your daughter," I shouted back. "But that didn't stop you from treating my home like it was yours. That didn't stop you from completely disregarding my feelings." The room fell silent again. My mom's face was red, her eyes blazing with anger. My dad looked defeated, his shoulders slumped. Claire was crying quietly on the couch. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. "Look, I don't want to fight. I don't want this to be ugly. But I need you to understand that this is serious. I'm not going to change my mind." "We understand," my dad said quietly. "We'll leave." My mom whipped around to face him. "What? We can't just give up." "We don't have a choice," my dad said. "She's right. We should have asked." "But, no," my dad said firmly. "We messed up. We need to own that." My mom stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Finally, she turned back to me, her expression cold. "Fine," she said. "We'll leave. But don't expect us to forgive you for this." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I said. "I'm asking for respect, and if you can't give me that, then maybe we need some distance." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked into the spare bedroom, where I could hear her opening drawers and throwing things into boxes. Claire stood up slowly and looked at me, her face still wet with tears. "I really am sorry, Emma. I never wanted to hurt you." "I believe you," I said. "But that doesn't change what happened." She nodded and followed my mom into the bedroom. My dad lingered for a moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said quietly. "We should have done this differently." "Yes," I said. "You should have." He nodded and turned to help pack. I stood in the middle of my living room, watching them move through my space, and I felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. This was necessary, but it still hurt. Their panic began when the building manager, with legal documents in hand, informed them they were trespassing and liable for all associated fees. Over the next few hours, my parents worked quickly to pack up Claire's things. They moved through the condo in tense silence, avoiding eye contact with me. I stayed out of their way, sitting in the living room and occasionally checking my phone. Gregory had texted me, "How's it going?" I replied, "They're packing now. Should be out by 6 p.m. "Good. Let me know if you need anything." I set my phone down and watched as my dad carried boxes out to their car. My mom was in the bedroom, disassembling the bed frame they'd put together just days before. Claire was in the bathroom, packing up her toiletries, At one point, my mom emerged from the bedroom, her face flushed and her hair disheveled. "I can't believe you're doing this," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't believe you'd choose a piece of property over your own sister." "This isn't about property," I said. "This is about boundaries. This is about respect." "Respect?" she scoffed. "You don't respect your family. You don't respect everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Name one thing you've done for me in the past 5 years that wasn't also for Claire." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She couldn't think of anything. "Exactly," I said. "You've spent so much time focusing on Claire that you forgot I existed. And when you did remember me, it was only because you needed something." "That's not fair," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's completely fair," I said, "and you know it." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and went back into the bedroom without another word. By 5 p.m., most of Claire's things were packed. My dad was loading the last of the boxes into their car, and my mom was doing a final sweep of the room to make sure they hadn't left anything behind. Claire came out of the bathroom, her bag slung over her shoulder. She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy from crying. She stopped in front of me, biting her lip. "Emma," she said quietly, "I know I messed up. I know I should have handled this differently. But I hope someday you can forgive me." I looked at her, at the little sister I'd spent so much of my life protecting and sacrificing for. Part of me wanted to tell her it was okay, that we could work through this. But I couldn't. Not yet. "I hope so too," I said. "But right now, I need space. I need time to figure out how I feel about all of this." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. "I understand." She turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the living room. My dad came back inside one last time, checking to make sure they'd gotten everything. He paused in the doorway, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and regret. "I really am sorry, Emma," he said. "I know we let you down." "You did," I said. "But if you really mean that, then maybe we can work through it, eventually." He nodded. "I hope so." And then he was gone. My mom was the last to leave. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. Her expression was hard, angry. "I hope you're happy," she said coldly. "I'm not," I said, "but I will be." She shook her head and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. Then I walked over and locked it. The condo was silent. I walked through each room, checking to make sure they'd taken everything. The spare bedroom was empty now, stripped of all the furniture and decorations they'd brought in. It looked bare and sad, but it was mine again. I opened the windows to let in some fresh air, trying to wash away the tension that still hung in the space. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Patricia. "I saw them leave. Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm okay. Thank you for your help." "Anytime. Let me know if you need anything else." I set my phone down and sank onto the couch. I felt drained, emotionally exhausted. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt free. As they scrambled to explain themselves, I sat calmly in my hotel room, finally knowing they'd think twice before interfering in my life ever again. The days following their departure were strange. My condo felt different, quieter, emptier, but also lighter. I spent the first evening just sitting on the couch, processing everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "I hope you realize what you've done. You've torn this family apart." I stared at the message for a long moment, then blocked her number. I did the same with my dad's number and Claire's. I needed space. I needed time to heal without them trying to guilt me into backing down. Over the next few days, I heard from extended family members and mutual friends. Word had spread quickly about what happened, and opinions were divided. My aunt called to tell me I'd been too harsh. "Family forgives, Emma," she said. "You should have just let Claire stay." I thanked her for her concern and ended the call. My cousin texted to say she understood. "I've been there," she wrote. "Sometimes you have to draw a line. Good for you." That message meant more to me than I expected. Gregory checked in regularly. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I thought," I told him. "It was hard, but it was necessary." "You did the right thing," he said. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. My colleagues noticed I seemed more focused, more confident. My boss commented that I seemed different. "In a good way," she clarified. "You seem more sure of yourself." I smiled. "I feel more sure of myself." A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Claire. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I was ready to read whatever she had to say. Inside was a handwritten note. "Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to write this. I'm sorry for everything. I should have stood up to Mom and Dad. I should have asked you directly. I was scared and desperate, and I let them convince me it would be okay. I know now that it wasn't. I found a small apartment and I'm working 2 jobs to make ends meet. It's hard, but I'm doing it on my own. I'm learning what it means to be independent. I hope someday we can talk again. I miss you. Love, Claire." I read the letter twice, then set it aside. I wasn't ready to respond yet, but I was glad she'd written it. Maybe someday we'd be able to rebuild our relationship, but it would have to be on my terms. A month passed, then 2. I started redecorating the spare bedroom, turning it into a real home office with new furniture and better lighting. Every change I made felt like reclaiming the space, making it truly mine. I joined a book club and started going to yoga classes. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I realized how much of my life I'd put on hold to accommodate my family's needs. One evening, I was sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset, when my phone rang. It was my dad. His number wasn't blocked because I'd unblocked it a few days earlier, curious if he'd reach out. I answered. "Emma," he said, his voice tentative. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I wasn't sure I would either," I said. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said. "Your mom and we've been talking. We were wrong. We shouldn't have done what we did." "No, you shouldn't have," I said. "Claire's struggling," he said. "But she's figuring it out. And I think it's been good for her. She needed to learn to stand on her own." "She did," I said. "And we needed to learn to respect your boundaries," he continued. "I know it's going to take time to rebuild trust, but I wanted you to know that we're trying to do better." I was quiet for a moment, processing his words. "I appreciate that, Dad, but I'm not ready to go back to the way things were." "I understand," he said. "I just wanted you to know that we're here when you're ready." "Okay," I said. We talked for a few more minutes, keeping the conversation light. When we hung up, I felt a small sense of hope. Maybe, eventually, we could find a new normal, but it would have to be built on respect and boundaries, not guilt and obligation. Over the following months, my parents made slow but genuine efforts to respect my space. They didn't push. They didn't demand. They simply let me know they were there if I needed them. Claire and I eventually had coffee together. It was awkward at first, but we talked honestly about what had happened. She'd grown a lot in the months since she'd moved out. She was still struggling, but she was proud of her independence. "I needed this," she admitted. I needed to learn that I couldn't always rely on other people to fix my problems. "I'm glad you're figuring it out," I said. We weren't back to being close, but we were finding our way to a new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than expectation. As for me, I continued building the life I wanted. I got a promotion at work. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I dated, casually at first, then more seriously. I filled my home with things that made me happy. And every time I walked through my door, I felt a deep sense of pride. This was my space, my life, my choice. It took months for my parents to fully understand the consequences of their actions. They'd depleted their savings trying to help Claire get back on her feet after I'd cut them off. They'd lost the easy access to me, the reliable daughter who always said yes. Their relationship with me was strained, and they had to work to rebuild it from scratch. Claire struggled in her studio apartment, working long hours and learning what it meant to support herself without a safety net. It was hard for her, but it was also transforming her into someone stronger, someone who didn't need to rely on others to solve her problems. As for me, I thrived. I became more confident in my decisions, more protective of my boundaries, more certain of my worth. I filled my life with people who respected me, who valued me, who didn't see me as a resource to be used. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that standing up for myself wasn't just about protecting my home. It was about protecting my dignity, my autonomy, my right to live my own life. And while the journey had been painful, it had also been necessary. Because sometimes the only way to show people you matter is to stop letting them treat you like you don't.